At 83 years old, Joyce Meyer remains one of the most recognizable Christian teachers in the world. Her voice is direct, her humor is blunt, and her message is intentionally practical. She does not speak like a traditional theologian standing behind an academic podium. She talks about anger, insecurity, marriage, money, discipline, forgiveness, and the private thoughts people are often afraid to admit. For millions of followers, Joyce Meyer represents survival. She has described enduring years of sexual abuse during childhood, escaping a destructive first marriage, and spending much of her early adult life controlled by bitterness, fear, and emotional pain. Her teachings promise that people do not have to remain trapped by what happened to them. Her rise from a working-class neighborhood in St. Louis to a worldwide television ministry is extraordinary. Joyce Meyer Ministries has generated annual revenue approaching or exceeding $100 million. Her television program has been translated into more than 100 languages. Her books have sold millions of copies, and her conferences have filled major arenas. That success has also created serious questions. Critics have challenged her teachings about faith, healing, and prosperity. Investigative reporting revealed expensive homes, luxury vehicles, substantial compensation packages, and a private jet connected to the ministry. A United States senator eventually included Joyce Meyer Ministries in an investigation examining the finances and governance of 6 major media ministries. Meyer cooperated with the investigation, changed several financial practices, and joined an evangelical accountability organization. The Senate inquiry ended without penalties or a definitive finding of wrongdoing. But the central ethical question never completely disappeared. When a religious leader becomes extraordinarily wealthy, where does ministry end and celebrity begin? This is the story of Pauline Joyce Hutchison Meyer. The story of a wounded child who became a global Bible teacher. The story of faith, money, influence, survival, and controversy. Joyce was born Pauline Joyce Hutchison on June 4, 1943, in St. Louis, Missouri. Her father entered the military around the time of her birth and served during World War II. According to Joyce, he returned home angry, emotionally damaged, and heavily dependent on alcohol. The home that should have protected her became a place of fear. Joyce has said that her father began sexually abusing her when she was very young and continued for years. She later estimated that he assaulted her hundreds of times. Because these details come primarily from Joyce's own testimony, they must be described as her account. Her father was never prosecuted, and the allegations were not examined in a criminal trial. But Joyce has discussed the abuse consistently across sermons, interviews, and books. It became the central experience through which she explained the emotional struggles of her adult life. She lived in constant fear of being summoned into the basement, garage, or another part of the house. She has said she attempted to tell her mother what was happening, but her father denied it. According to Joyce, her mother eventually witnessed evidence of the abuse but felt too frightened and emotionally dependent to confront her husband or protect her daughter. Joyce later described her mother as another victim inside the home, a woman who endured domestic violence and lacked the emotional strength to escape. That understanding came much later. As a child, Joyce experienced her mother's silence as abandonment. She learned that the people who were supposed to provide safety could not be trusted. She developed anger, shame, and an instinct to control everything around her. Abuse did not end when an individual incident was over. Its effects followed her into school, relationships, and adulthood. Joyce attended O'Fallon Technical High School in St. Louis. She developed practical office and bookkeeping skills, but did not receive an ordinary emotional education in trust, security, or healthy intimacy. She later said she felt dirty, damaged, and different from everyone around her. At 18, Joyce married the first young man who showed serious interest in her. She has described the decision as an attempt to escape her childhood home rather than the beginning of a healthy partnership. The marriage lasted approximately 5 years. Joyce described her first husband as unfaithful and unreliable. The couple moved frequently and separated repeatedly. She later admitted that she participated in stealing payroll checks from an employer during this period. She eventually returned the money. The admission became part of the transparency that defined her later preaching. Instead of presenting herself as morally perfect, she regularly described her worst decisions and most embarrassing behavior. Joyce gave birth to her first son, David, in December 1965. By 1966, the marriage had collapsed. She returned to her parents' home with her infant son, entering the same environment from which she had attempted to escape. Late that year, Joyce met David Benjamin Meyer, better known as Dave. According to the story they later told, Joyce was washing her mother's car when Dave made a playful comment. Her response was sarcastic and dismissive. Dave remained interested. They dated briefly and married on January 7, 1967. Dave adopted Joyce's son and raised him without treating him as a stepchild. Joyce and Dave eventually had 3 additional children, Laura, Sandra, and Daniel. Their marriage gave Joyce something she had rarely experienced before: stability. Dave worked as an engineering draftsman. He was calm where Joyce was confrontational. He was patient where she was suspicious. But marrying a kind man did not automatically erase the damage caused by her childhood. Joyce has admitted that she attempted to control Dave, criticized him, and became angry whenever events did not happen according to her expectations. She did not trust anyone to make decisions on her behalf because nearly every authority figure in her early life had failed her. She wanted peace but continued creating conflict. She wanted love but had difficulty accepting it. She attended church and identified as a Christian, but she still felt emotionally imprisoned. Joyce has said she first accepted Christianity as a child. Her adult spiritual transformation, however, occurred gradually during the 1970s. She became deeply interested in the Bible and began looking for principles she could apply directly to her behavior. In 1976, during an intense period of prayer, Joyce experienced what she described as a powerful encounter with God. While driving to work, she prayed out of frustration and desperation. She believed she heard God call her name and tell her to remain patient. Later that day, she said she felt overwhelmed by divine love. That evening, while at a bowling alley, she described herself as feeling almost intoxicated by the Holy Spirit. To someone outside the charismatic Christian tradition, that description may sound unusual. Within Pentecostal and charismatic Christianity, personal encounters with the Holy Spirit are treated as real and life-changing events. Believers may describe warmth, joy, supernatural peace, speaking in tongues, or an intense awareness of God's presence. Joyce interpreted the experience as the beginning of her true calling. She joined Bible studies and became associated with Life Christian Center, a charismatic church in the St. Louis area. Her earliest teaching opportunities were modest. She led an early morning Bible class inside a local cafeteria. People arrived before work to hear her explain scripture. Joyce did not speak like someone performing a formal religious ceremony. Her working-class St. Louis accent, humor, and honesty made her sound like the person sitting beside the audience rather than someone speaking above it. The group grew. She became increasingly active at Life Christian Center and eventually served as an associate pastor. She also began participating in radio ministry. Her early broadcast was approximately 15 minutes long and aired on a St. Louis radio station. Radio revealed the strength of Joyce's communication style. Listeners did not need to see a stage or elaborate production. Her voice carried the entire message. She spoke about subjects people experienced every day: how to stop complaining, how to control anger, how to forgive people who never apologized, how to change destructive habits, how to recognize selfish behavior, how to survive pain without allowing it to control the future. Her teaching was built around a simple idea. The Bible was not only a book describing events from the ancient world. It was a manual that could be applied to thoughts, emotions, and relationships in the present. That practical emphasis would become her greatest strength and one of the main reasons critics questioned her theology. Supporters heard clear instructions they could use immediately. Critics sometimes heard Christian self-help that reduced complicated scripture to motivational lessons. In 1985, Joyce left her associate pastor position and formed an independent ministry called Life in the Word. The ministry expanded her radio program to additional cities between Chicago and Kansas City. Cassette recordings of her teachings were distributed through churches, conferences, and mail order programs. The organization was growing, but the Meyer family was not yet living like television celebrities. Joyce has told stories about leaving a stable job to pursue ministry and struggling to afford ordinary household items. Those memories became evidence, in her mind, that the later expansion of the ministry was the result of faith and persistence. Her teaching materials multiplied. She developed series about emotional healing, spiritual warfare, marriage, discipline, and the power of thought. One of Joyce's most important themes came directly from her experience of abuse. A person could not control what had happened in the past, but that person could decide whether the past would control the future. This message gave her unusual credibility among people carrying trauma. During a time when many churches were uncomfortable discussing sexual abuse, Joyce spoke publicly about shame, fear, and anger. She acknowledged that Christian conversion did not instantly remove every emotional wound. Healing, in her account, took years. She had to recognize destructive patterns, accept responsibility for the way she treated others, and gradually replace old thoughts with new ones. This became the foundation of what would eventually become her most successful book. But before her publishing empire emerged, Joyce faced a serious medical crisis. In 1989, a routine examination revealed an aggressive form of breast cancer. Doctors recommended immediate surgery. Joyce underwent a mastectomy. She has been careful to explain that she received medical treatment. Her testimony was not that she ignored doctors and waited for a miracle. She experienced intense fear, prayed for peace, and proceeded with surgery. According to Joyce, she did not require additional cancer treatment afterward. The experience strengthened one of her central teachings. Faith did not always mean avoiding the frightening situation. Sometimes faith meant moving through it without being destroyed by fear. During the early 1990s, the Christian media industry was expanding rapidly. Cable television created more channels, and religious networks needed programming. Joyce Meyer encouraged Joyce to enter television. In 1993, Life in the Word began appearing on television, initially through outlets including Chicago's WGN and Black Entertainment Television. The decision changed everything. Television allowed Joyce to move beyond regional radio and reach homes across the country. Her appearance was different from that of many traditional television ministers. She did not depend on an organ, choir, or theatrical healing service. Episodes often featured Joyce speaking at conferences, telling stories about her own failures and responding to the audience's reactions. She could be serious one moment and comedic the next. She imitated selfish behavior, described arguments with Dave, and joked about the unrealistic expectations Christians sometimes placed on themselves. The program eventually became known as Enjoying Everyday Life. The title summarized her theology. Christianity was not supposed to be limited to preparing someone for the afterlife. Faith was supposed to change how people experienced ordinary life. The kitchen, the workplace, marriage, traffic, parenting, money, thoughts no one else could hear. As television distribution expanded, Joyce's conferences also grew. Women formed a particularly large part of her audience. Her success challenged religious traditions that opposed women teaching or exercising pastoral authority over men. Some conservative critics rejected her ministry primarily because she was a woman preacher. Others objected to specific theological teachings regardless of gender. Supporters argued that her ability to reach millions of people demonstrated that women could possess the same teaching and leadership gifts as men. Joyce rarely allowed the argument to change her direction. She believed she had been called by God. For her, that calling carried more authority than criticism from religious institutions. Publishing became the second major engine of her influence. Joyce wrote about subjects already proven through her broadcasts and conferences. Her books included personal stories, biblical passages, lists of behaviors, and direct instructions. She did not attempt to write academic theology. She wrote for people reading during lunch breaks, recovering from divorce, battling depression, or attempting to understand why they repeatedly sabotaged their own relationships. Beauty for Ashes connected Joyce's abuse story to the possibility of restoration. Approval Addiction explored the fear of rejection. Living Beyond Your Feelings argued that emotions were real but should not control every decision. The Confident Woman addressed insecurity. Power Thoughts expanded her teaching about the connection between thoughts, words, and behavior. Her defining publishing achievement was Battlefield of the Mind. First released during the 1990s, the book argued that many of life's most important conflicts begin inside the mind. Fear, condemnation, anger, doubt and confusion could become mental strongholds. Joyce encouraged readers to examine what they were thinking and compare those thoughts with their understanding of Scripture. The message was spiritually framed, but it also resembled ideas later popularized through discussions of cognitive habits and emotional regulation. That similarity helped the book reach beyond traditional church audiences. Battlefield of the Mind became a publishing phenomenon. By the time a 30th anniversary edition was released in 2025, its publisher reported worldwide sales exceeding 9 million copies. Joyce eventually authored more than 150 books. Publisher information states that her work has been translated into more than 170 combined languages. Millions of books were distributed through stores, ministry events, and charitable programs. The publishing success gave Joyce a source of personal income separate from donations. That distinction later became extremely important. In 2002, Hachette Book Group reportedly paid more than $10 million for rights connected to Joyce's existing catalog. She was no longer simply a minister receiving a church salary. She was a commercially successful author whose intellectual property possessed significant value. That fact complicated every later discussion of her wealth. Critics argued that the book audience had been created through a donor-supported television ministry. Supporters argued that authors were entitled to earn royalties from books they wrote, regardless of whether they were also religious leaders. The ministry itself continued expanding. By the end of the 1990s and beginning of the 2000s, Joyce Meyer had become a major figure in American evangelical media. Her program was broadcast internationally. The organization built a large headquarters near Fenton, Missouri. Hundreds of employees supported television production, publishing, donor relations, conferences, and humanitarian projects. The ministry also developed social service programs. In 2000, Joyce helped establish the St. Louis Dream Center, an inner-city church and outreach organization. Its programs included food assistance, services for families, and other community support. Hand of Hope became the international missions and humanitarian division of Joyce Meyer Ministries. According to ministry and publisher materials, Hand of Hope has supported feeding programs, clean water projects, medical and dental care, disaster relief, and efforts assisting women and children affected by trafficking. The organization developed partnerships in multiple countries rather than attempting to perform every project directly. Joyce's son David became a senior leader in Hand of Hope. Her son Daniel eventually became a senior executive overseeing United States operations. Family participation strengthened the organization's continuity, but it also raised questions. When the founder, spouse, and children all receive positions inside a tax-exempt ministry, critics may question whether hiring decisions, salaries, and benefits are truly independent. The ministry's position was that family members performed real work and possessed years of relevant experience. This conflict between family leadership and independent oversight would become a central issue during government scrutiny. By the early 2000s, Joyce Meyer Ministries had become a financial empire. Money was arriving through donations, media partnerships, product sales, and conferences. Expensive infrastructure accompanied that growth. A worldwide television operation required studios, editing systems, offices, warehouses, international travel, and hundreds of employees. Joyce also lived with a level of luxury that appeared inconsistent to some observers with a ministry supported by donations. In 2003, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch published an extensive investigation into the ministry's money and property. The reporting described a corporate jet valued at around $10 million, an expensive headquarters, luxury vehicles, valuable furnishings, and costly homes associated with Joyce and members of her family. One of the most repeated claims involved a marble-topped antique commode valued at $23,000. Many people assumed the word commode meant a toilet. In this case, it referred to a chest of drawers. Joyce later explained to Senator Chuck Grassley that the piece was part of a large group of furniture purchased for the ministry headquarters. The ministry said the specific value assigned to that item was erroneous and did not represent what had actually been paid for one cabinet. The explanation corrected the most sensational interpretation, but the wider financial questions remained. Records examined during a property tax dispute indicated that the ministry's board had approved compensation packages of up to $900,000 for Joyce and up to $450,000 for Dave during 2002 and 2003. The newspaper later issued corrections and clarifications concerning parts of its reporting. The available board records showed the maximum compensation authorized, not necessarily the exact amount ultimately received. The paper also corrected statements implying that every personal use of the ministry's aircraft or vehicles had been provided without deduction. The corrections mattered. They did not erase the documented existence of large compensation packages, expensive property, and corporate travel, but they showed why complicated financial investigations should not be reduced to one sensational headline. At the time, religious organizations classified as churches were not required to file the same public Form 990 disclosures as many other nonprofit organizations. That meant donors had less access to detailed compensation and governance information. Christian watchdog organizations criticized Joyce Meyer Ministries for limited transparency and called for greater financial disclosure. A local Christian television station operated by Minister Larry Rice stopped carrying Joyce's program in 2004. Rice cited concerns about her lifestyle and teachings. Joyce defended herself. She argued that a successful businessperson in St. Louis could own expensive property without attracting the same moral criticism applied to a preacher. She viewed financial success as a blessing and did not believe religious leaders were required to live in poverty. Critics responded that business customers purchase a product, while ministry donors may believe they are financing evangelism and aid to vulnerable people. That difference created a special ethical responsibility. The ministry announced major changes. Joyce's direct ministry salary was reduced to approximately $250,000. At the same time, the structure of her book income changed. She began retaining royalties from books sold through outside retail channels, while continuing to direct certain royalties from ministry-controlled sales back to the organization. This arrangement separated more of her personal income from donor contributions. It also made her total earnings harder for the public to calculate because private publishing royalties were not included in the ministry's public financial statements. A ministry representative later said that Joyce's ministry salary remained at approximately $250,000 for many years. No reliable public source provides a complete current calculation of Joyce Meyer's personal wealth. Online celebrity net worth estimates vary dramatically and are usually based on speculation. They often combine personally owned property, ministry-owned assets, book royalties, and imagined investment income without access to private records. Any exact claim about her current net worth should therefore be treated cautiously. The financial controversy did not stop her rise. In 2005, Time magazine included Joyce Meyer among the 25 most influential evangelicals in the United States. Her program continued expanding into international markets. Enjoying Everyday Life eventually became available through television, radio, websites, mobile applications, streaming services, YouTube, and social media. Publisher information says the program has been distributed in more than 100 languages. The ministry has sometimes described its potential worldwide audience in the billions. That number represents the population that could theoretically access channels or platforms carrying the program. It does not mean billions of people watch Joyce every day. Even with that qualification, the reach remains substantial. Joyce had become one of the most internationally distributed Christian teachers of her generation. Her influence was built on more than broadcasting technology. She understood her audience. Many viewers did not want an argument about ancient languages or denominational history. They wanted help surviving the next 24 hours. Joyce told them to make the bed, arrive at work on time, stop complaining, forgive the difficult relative, and examine the thoughts running repeatedly through the mind. She made spiritual growth sound measurable. Do not interrupt someone during an argument. Do not spend money to impress other people. Do the right thing even when emotions resist. Stop using trauma as permission to mistreat others. These messages could feel empowering. They could also feel harsh to people dealing with clinical depression, severe mental illness, or complex trauma. A repeated instruction to control thoughts or choose joy may not adequately address conditions requiring professional treatment. Joyce's ministry has not presented itself as a replacement for licensed medical or psychological care, but some critics argue that charismatic self-help teaching can blur those boundaries. Supporters respond that Joyce openly discusses long-term struggle rather than promising instant emotional transformation. She does not portray herself as someone who prayed once and became emotionally perfect. She describes a gradual process involving faith, personal responsibility, and repeated behavioral change. That distinction helps explain why abuse survivors have remained a central part of her audience. Joyce's story of forgiveness became one of her most powerful and controversial teachings. She and Dave moved them closer and helped provide for their needs. This was not presented as denial. Joyce continued identifying her father's behavior as abuse. Forgiveness, in her teaching, did not mean pretending the offense was acceptable or automatically restoring trust. It meant refusing to allow hatred to control the remainder of her life. According to Joyce, her father eventually admitted what he had done, apologized, and asked for forgiveness. She led him in a Christian prayer and later baptized him in 2001. Her telling of the story brought hope to people who wanted reconciliation. It also required careful interpretation. No survivor is obligated to resume contact with an abuser. Forgiveness does not require remaining in danger, abandoning legal accountability, or removing healthy boundaries. Joyce described her decision as a personal spiritual calling, not a universal safety plan. Her willingness to make abuse central to her public story separated her from many religious broadcasters. It also influenced several later decisions. In 2024, Joyce withdrew from a scheduled appearance at Gateway Church after allegations involving the church's founder and a minor became public. In January 2025, Joyce Meyer Ministries paused enjoying everyday life on the Daystar television network after serious allegations involving the network's leadership became public. Her son Daniel told ministry staff that, because of Joyce's history, the organization felt a responsibility to stand for truth and remain sensitive to people affected by abuse. The program continued through other networks and digital platforms. These decisions demonstrated that Joyce's childhood history remained more than a story used in old sermons. It had become part of how the ministry publicly evaluated partnerships. But before those events, the organization faced the most serious financial examination in its history. In November 2007, Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa announced that he was requesting detailed information from 6 prominent media ministries. The ministries were associated with Joyce Meyer, Benny Hinn, Kenneth Copeland, Creflo Dollar, Eddie Long, and Paula White. Grassley emphasized that the inquiry was not investigating religious doctrine. It examined tax-exempt policy, executive compensation, governing boards, and possible personal use of ministry assets. Because donors receive tax benefits and religious organizations receive exemptions, Grassley argued that the public had a legitimate interest in whether ministry funds were being used according to the law. His letter to Joyce and Dave Meyer requested information about compensation, housing, vehicles, aircraft, board relationships, and other expenses. The inquiry was widely described as an investigation of televangelists. Some religious leaders accused Grassley of government interference in church affairs. Others believed the inquiry was necessary because churches were not required to provide the same public disclosures as other nonprofits. Joyce Meyer Ministries chose to cooperate. The organization provided extensive answers and financial records. Senate updates later identified it as the ministry that had responded most fully during the early stage of the inquiry. That cooperation did not mean every previous criticism was false. It meant the ministry allowed investigators to examine the requested material and made changes to its governance. The organization increased the independence of its board, changed compensation procedures, and continued publishing audited financial information. In March 2009, Joyce Meyer Ministries became an accredited member of the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, commonly known as the ECFA. ECFA members agree to standards addressing governance, financial oversight, fundraising, and use of resources. The organization remains an ECFA member as of 2026. ECFA accreditation does not mean every critic must approve of a ministry's theology or spending priorities. It means the organization has submitted to a recognized system of evangelical financial standards. Grassley's inquiry ended in 2011. No penalties were imposed on Joyce Meyer Ministries, and the review did not produce a definitive finding that Joyce had violated the law. The final discussion praised Joyce Meyer Ministries and Benny Hinn Ministries for cooperating and making significant reforms. Several of the other ministries had provided incomplete responses or refused portions of the request. That conclusion is important. Joyce Meyer was financially scrutinized by Senate investigators and was not found guilty of criminal or civil wrongdoing. It is equally important not to rewrite the investigation as proof that every spending decision had been wise. The inquiry raised broader concerns about religious nonprofits whose boards were controlled by founders, relatives, or close associates. It encouraged reform and helped produce a national discussion about ministry accountability. Joyce's organization survived because it cooperated and changed. The ministry continued handling enormous amounts of money. ECFA's most recently available comparative information shows that Joyce Meyer Ministries reported approximately $97.8 million in total revenue for 2024. Cash donations accounted for more than $88 million. The organization reported approximately $106 million in expenses, creating a deficit of roughly $8.2 million for that year. The ministry ended 2024 with net assets of about $51.5 million. These figures reveal two realities. Joyce Meyer Ministries remains a very large religious nonprofit. It has also recently spent more than it received, with reported deficits in both 2023 and 2024 and a decline in net assets. Program expenses include broadcasting, teaching operations, and ministry outreach, as well as humanitarian activities. They should not be interpreted as $91 million delivered directly to people in poverty. Producing a global television program is itself classified as part of the ministry's religious program. Supporters believe broadcasting practical Bible teaching is one of the organization's central charitable purposes. Critics may believe a larger percentage should go directly to food, shelter, and medical assistance. That disagreement involves priorities more than arithmetic. Hand of Hope remains the ministry's primary humanitarian division. It has supported feeding sites in multiple countries, drilled or financed clean water wells, operated or partnered with medical programs, and responded to natural disasters. Its Project GRL initiative focuses on vulnerable women and children, including people affected by trafficking. In 2023, Joyce founded Hope Mountain Ranch, an 800-acre property in Utah described as a refuge and a center for United States outreach. In 2024, the ministry reported opening its first Hope Factory, intended to produce food for its own relief programs and other humanitarian organizations. These projects are frequently highlighted in donor communications. Supporters see them as proof that Joyce's success has been converted into tangible assistance. Skeptics argue that humanitarian imagery can also function as fundraising marketing and that donors should continue examining audited numbers rather than relying only on emotional stories. Both observations can be true. The ministry performs substantial humanitarian work. It also benefits from showing that work to potential donors. This is not unique to Joyce Meyer Ministries. Nearly every major charitable organization must communicate its impact to continue raising money. The ethical standard is whether the communication is accurate and whether resources are used consistently with the promises made. Joyce's theological controversy has been as persistent as the financial debate. She developed her ministry within the charismatic and word of faith environment. Word of faith teaching often emphasizes spoken confession, spiritual authority, physical healing, positive expectation, and the belief that faith can influence material circumstances. At its most extreme, this becomes prosperity theology. Prosperity preaching teaches or implies that sufficient faith, positive words, and financial giving will produce wealth and health. Critics argue that this message transforms Christianity into a transaction. Give money and receive money. Speak positively and avoid sickness. Experience tragedy and assume faith was insufficient. Joyce has denied that her ministry can be reduced to the prosperity gospel. Her teaching includes sacrifice, discipline, generosity, suffering, and service. She frequently tells audiences that spiritual maturity involves doing difficult things rather than receiving everything they want. However, critics have identified statements from earlier teachings that appeared consistent with word of faith and prosperity ideas. She emphasized faith as a powerful force. She taught extensively about the impact of spoken words. She connected obedience and giving with blessing. She defended personal prosperity as compatible with Christian ministry. Doctrinal critics also challenged some of her earlier language about sin, righteousness, and what happened to Jesus between the crucifixion and resurrection. Not all Christians interpret those subjects in the same way, but some theologians believe Joyce's language moved beyond historic evangelical teaching. Over time, Joyce revised or clarified portions of her message. In 2019, she publicly acknowledged that her earlier understanding of prosperity and faith had become unbalanced. She explained that she once treated many personal tragedies as evidence that someone lacked sufficient faith. She now rejected that conclusion. People can become sick despite possessing faith. Children can die despite their parents praying. Christians can experience suffering without having caused it through negative thoughts. This admission was significant because major religious personalities rarely acknowledge teaching something harmful or incomplete. Some critics believed her correction was too limited and arrived after decades of influence. Others viewed it as evidence of humility and continued spiritual development. Joyce did not abandon belief in faith, healing, or divine provision. She attempted to place those ideas inside a wider understanding of suffering. Faith did not guarantee freedom from problems. Faith helped people endure problems without losing hope. That change brought her message closer to the experience of her own life. No amount of childhood faith had prevented her father's abuse. Her Christianity did not prevent breast cancer. Building a ministry did not protect her from public investigation. Success did not eliminate criticism. Her own story contained too much suffering to support a simple promise that believers would avoid pain. Joyce's legacy is also tied to the rise of Christian self-help. She translated theological ideas into language about boundaries, habits, emotions, and thought patterns. To supporters, this made Christianity useful. To critics, it risked turning the gospel into a personal improvement program. Traditional Christianity centers on worship, sin, grace, redemption, and the person of Jesus Christ. A motivational version can appear centered on confidence, productivity, better relationships, and financial success. Joyce's teaching moves between both worlds. She preaches salvation through Christ, prayer, forgiveness, and the authority of Scripture. She also spends enormous amounts of time discussing mood, discipline, confidence, and personal fulfillment. That combination is exactly why her books became commercially successful. Readers who might never purchase a systematic theology book were willing to read about controlling anger or winning the battle inside the mind. Her humor was equally important. Joyce refused to present spiritual life as a performance of constant seriousness. She told stories about wanting Dave to behave differently, becoming irritated in grocery stores, and struggling to remain patient. By admitting her own selfishness, she gave audiences permission to recognize theirs. Her bluntness could feel freeing. It could also sound judgmental. Joyce often told people that remaining miserable was a choice. For someone trapped in ordinary bitterness, that message might create responsibility and hope. For someone experiencing severe illness, poverty, or trauma, it might sound like blame. The effect depended on the listener's circumstances and the context surrounding the statement. This tension exists throughout motivational religion. Agency can empower people. Too much emphasis on agency can ignore structural injustice, disability, and mental illness. Joyce's humanitarian work showed awareness that not every problem could be solved by thought alone. Communities needed clean water. Disaster victims needed shelter. Trafficking survivors needed safety. Her ministry attempted to combine internal transformation with practical assistance. The continued use of her name in the organization's title also deserves attention. Joyce Meyer Ministries is built around a single personality. Her image appears on books, broadcasts, websites, and conference advertising. This creates a strong brand, but also makes succession difficult. The ministry has attempted to build an executive structure involving Joyce's children and non-family board members. Daniel Meyer has overseen United States operations, while David Meyer has led Hand of Hope's international work. Dave has remained a stabilizing presence in the family and organization. Joyce frequently credits him with supporting the ministry before its success was guaranteed. Their marriage has lasted for more than 5 decades. She does not describe it as effortless, She describes Dave as someone whose patience exposed how much she needed to change. The Meyers have children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Their family has experienced the unusual pressure of functioning both as a family and as leadership inside a global organization. That structure can preserve the founder's values. It can also discourage independent criticism when family loyalty and employment overlap. The ministry says independent board oversight now protects compensation and financial decisions. Its Senate cooperation and ECFA membership support the claim that governance improved. The debate continues because donors cannot access every private financial detail. Joyce's personal lifestyle remains more comfortable than that of most people who send money to her ministry. She has never adopted an image of poverty. Supporters believe wealth earned through publishing and decades of work does not invalidate her message. Critics believe religious leaders should voluntarily live more modestly because their influence depends on the trust of people who may be financially vulnerable. There is no single legal formula determining how wealthy a preacher is allowed to become. The debate is moral. Jesus spoke frequently about money, generosity, greed, and care for the poor. Christians disagree about whether wealth itself is dangerous or whether the central issue is how it is acquired and used. Joyce's life sits directly inside that disagreement. Her critics point to private aircraft and expensive property. Her supporters point to books she wrote, organizations she built, and humanitarian projects operating around the world. The complete record contains both. By the middle of the 2020s, Joyce was entering a different stage of life. She no longer needed to prove that a woman from St. Louis could build a worldwide ministry that had already been established. Her books had reached multiple generations. People who discovered Battlefield of the Mind in the 1990s were now sharing it with children and grandchildren. A 30th anniversary edition appeared in 2025. Her program continued through streaming, television, and social media. In 2025, she held another major Love Life Women's Conference in San Antonio. The ongoing schedule demonstrated that Joyce remained active at 83. Her influence can be measured through numbers. More than 150 books, millions of copies sold, broadcasting in more than 100 languages, hundreds of employees, annual revenue approaching $100 million, decades of conferences and television production. But numbers do not fully explain why people follow her. The deeper reason is identification. Joyce does not speak as someone whose life was always peaceful. She speaks as someone who remembers being afraid inside her own home. Her audience sees a woman who carried shame into adulthood, made destructive decisions, and still built a different life. That story is powerful even for people who do not accept every part of her theology. Survival created her authority. The financial empire complicated it. Her supporters see prosperity as evidence that pain did not receive the final word. Her critics see the danger of turning spiritual influence into personal wealth. Her life can support either interpretation depending on which facts receive the most attention. A responsible documentary must resist both extremes. Joyce Meyer is not simply a fraudulent televangelist who never helped anyone. The available evidence does not support that reduction. Her ministry has provided real teaching resources and humanitarian assistance. She cooperated with Senate investigators, implemented reforms, and remains accredited by the ECFA. She has not been convicted of financial fraud, and the Senate inquiry ended without penalties. But she also cannot be presented only as a humble Bible teacher untouched by legitimate financial controversy. Large compensation packages were approved. Luxury assets existed. Family members occupied important positions. Public pressure contributed to financial and governance changes. Her earlier prosperity, teaching sometimes communicated ideas she later acknowledged were unbalanced. The truth requires all of these facts. Joyce's greatest achievement may not be the money, books, or television reach. It may be her decision to speak about abuse when silence would have been easier. By telling her story, she gave countless survivors language for experiences they had been taught to hide. She demonstrated that forgiveness did not require calling evil good. She showed that spiritual healing could be gradual. She admitted that being hurt did not excuse hurting everyone else. At her best, Joyce's message combines compassion with responsibility. You did not cause what happened to you, but you still deserve the opportunity to decide what happens next. At its weakest, the same message can become too simple. Not every illness can be overcome through positive thinking. Not every financial struggle results from poor choices. Not every trauma survivor should reconcile with an abuser. Not every religious leader's wealth should automatically be called a divine blessing. Joyce's own evolution suggests she understands at least some of those limitations. She has changed teachings, restructured finances, and withdrawn from media or church partnerships when allegations involving abuse created moral concern. Whether those changes were motivated by conviction, public pressure, or both is impossible to know completely. Public figures often change for several reasons at once. The person inside the brand remains partly private. Viewers know Joyce through edited television episodes, books, conferences, and personal stories selected to support specific teachings. They do not know every family conversation, financial decision, or moment of doubt. No documentary can claim access to an entire human being. It can examine the record. That record shows a child born into fear, a young woman who attempted to escape through marriage, a divorced mother who met a patient man named Dave, a Christian who experienced a spiritual awakening while driving to work, a Bible teacher who began with a small cafeteria class, a radio speaker who became a television personality, an author who turned private battles into best-selling books, a survivor who eventually cared for and forgave the father she said abused her, a ministry leader who built an organization generating nearly $100 million a year, a celebrity preacher whose lifestyle created public outrage, a target of a Senate financial inquiry who cooperated, made reforms, and faced no penalty, a teacher who admitted that parts of her prosperity message had become unbalanced, and an 83-year-old woman who continues walking on stages, opening a Bible, and telling audiences that their past does not have to become their future. Joyce Meyer's story is not only about religion. It is about the power of narrative. She transformed the most painful experiences of her life into a message understood around the world. She gave her suffering meaning by using it to help other people interpret theirs. That message created a ministry. The ministry created a media empire. The empire created wealth. The wealth created scrutiny. The scrutiny created reform. And the reform allowed the ministry to continue. Every stage grew from the one before it. Without the abuse story, Joyce may never have developed the same connection with hurting audiences. Without her communication ability, the story might never have reached beyond St. Louis. Without television and publishing, she would not have achieved worldwide influence. Without financial success, she would not have faced the same questions about luxury and accountability. Her greatest strength and greatest controversy were both consequences of scale. A small Bible teacher can speak casually about blessing. A global religious leader controlling millions of donated dollars must define what blessing means in practice. Joyce Meyer has spent decades teaching people to examine their thoughts, words, and behavior. History will examine hers. Some people will remember the private jet. Some will remember the Senate investigation. Some will remember Battlefield of the Mind. Some will remember hearing her describe abuse and realizing for the first time that they were not alone. Others will remember a television voice telling them to stop waiting for perfect circumstances and begin changing what they could control. All of these memories belong to the same legacy. Joyce Meyer represents the possibilities and dangers of modern religious media. Television allowed a survivor with no traditional path to institutional power to reach millions of people. It also transformed spiritual teaching into a brand capable of generating enormous wealth. Publishing allowed her to distribute practical ideas across languages and generations. It also blurred the boundary between nonprofit ministry and private commercial success. Family leadership provided loyalty and continuity. It also raised questions about independence. Faith helped Joyce survive experiences that could have destroyed her. Certain teachings about faith also became so extreme that she later acknowledged they required correction. Her story refuses to remain simple. Perhaps that is why it remains important. The easiest documentaries create heroes and villains. Real lives are rarely that clean. Joyce Meyer has inspired people, helped people, and challenged churches to speak more openly about trauma. She has also benefited personally from a religious system built through donations, media access, and the loyalty of followers. She has faced serious criticism and responded with measurable reforms. Whether those reforms are sufficient remains a judgment each viewer must make. What cannot be denied is the scale of the transformation. Pauline Joyce Hutchison began life believing that the world was dangerous and that no one would protect her. Joyce Meyer became a woman capable of commanding arenas, publishing empires, and an international ministry. She did not erase her past. She built her public identity around confronting it. At 83, she continues teaching that the most important battlefield exists inside the human mind. Her own life suggests another battlefield as well: the conflict between faith and wealth, between influence and accountability, between forgiveness and justice, between a spiritual calling and a commercial brand. Those battles have defined Joyce Meyer as completely as any sermon she has preached. Her ministry continues. Her books continue selling. Her programs continue reaching new audiences. Her humanitarian projects continue operating. And the debate surrounding her legacy continues with them. Joyce Meyer survived a childhood designed to silence her. She found her voice. She turned that voice into an empire. And whether the world hears a message of hope, a message of prosperity, or a complicated mixture of both, depends on which part of her extraordinary story it chooses to remember. If you enjoyed this content, please share and subscribe.